Hi, everyone. Welcome to Retire with Style. I'm Wade. I'm joined by my co host, Alex. And today we're joined as well by Kerry Pechter, who is a longtime editor of the Retirement Income Journal and a well known leading professional in the industry, and the author of Annuity for Dummies, the first edition of which we'll talk about came out in 2008. But we're now celebrating, and the particular reason to have you this week on the show on July 20th. Annuities for Dummies, the second edition, is being released 15 years after the first edition. So it is available for pre-order on Amazon. It's because it's part of that Dummies series that you see in bookstores everywhere. You'll be able to get it at your local bookstores as well. Being published this week. We're happy to have you on the show, Kerry. Welcome.
As they say, it's great to be here.
And yeah, just as we get started, often we find it's easier to let our guests give a little bit of their own background in terms of us trying to read a paragraph. So can you just tell us a little bit about, I know you've been at Vanguard, you've done all kinds of things throughout your career. So could you give us a little bit of background about that?
Yeah, I bring a kind of an unusual background to the annuities field in general. I was a business reporter for a long time, and then in 1997, I went to work for the Vanguard Group and was assigned to help market annuities and work in their retirement resource center. So that required me to learn to take a deep dive into the single premium immediate annuities and the variable annuities, deferred variable annuities that we were selling, and to learn how to explain annuities to the public. And also working on many different other, gnarly tax issues associated with retirement planning and RMDs and things like that. And then from there, I became editor of Annuity Market News in New York at Source Media. And while I was there, I wrote the first edition of Annuities for Dummies. And then during the financial crisis, there was a lot of change and closing of publications and reopening. Anyway, I started Retirement Income Journal on my own with largely the same audience of professionals. That was a business to business newsletter. So I was covering wasn't writing about retirement. I was writing about the business of retirement, and my audience was financial advisors and insurance executives, and I covered the industry as a reporter who had also worked somewhat in the industry. And so then, for 13 years, I published Retirement Income Journal every week. And that gave me a lot of exposure to the people who build annuities and who could explain how they build them and how they distribute them, and how the entire industry works, not just in the United States, but the whole world. And then while publishing that, I've also taken a great interest in comparative Social Security systems around the world. And I've been to Costa Rica and Israel and France and Spain and Iceland to research and write about and publish articles about their Social Security systems and compare them to ours, because ours will soon be reformed in one way or another. And then over the past couple of years, I've been writing about what I think is the most important recent trend in the annuity industry, which is the entry of private equity companies into the life annuity business. So maybe that'll come up a little bit later. But that's I've been both. What I bring to the table in terms of publishing is a reporter's background, the experience inside the business, experience covering the business as a business, and comparative studies, as well as owning an annuity. So I've looked at, and my main contribution to the industry has been to go to write about the different silos of the industry. Most of my readers focus on a particular silo, and my service was to go from silo to silo and sort of cross-pollinate.
That's great.
and that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to, be consistent in practicing that.
So, so Kerry, you're saying you not only write about annuities, but you own them. So you're like the Cy Sperling of the. That's the hair
Well,
club for men guy. No,
as
never
I got
mind.
as I got closer to retirement, and I thought, well, am I gonna, walk the walk? And so I can talk about that. It probably better later in the podcast to talk about that, but I can talk about my own experience. I don't want to make it into an endorsement of any particular, uh,
No, no,
but I
no, no.
think,
That's what I meant. I meant the more like the Cy Sperling commercial where he's like,
Yeah, yeah.
not only am I the CEO of the Hair Club for Men, I'm also a client. And not only do you write
oh,
about
that's right. I
annuities,
remember
yeah,
that.
the joke fell flat. So,
Yeah.
so it goes on Retire with Style.
Maybe if
No,
you
it makes
pull
it,
heavy hair yourself.
it's instructive. I think that, I mean, to speak with, I thought, to speak with any authority. I mean, because that's what people would already ask me.
Yeah,
Okay, you're writing about annuities. Do you own one?
yeah,
And
I got you.
so, I, I had to put up or shut up.
No, no, I get it. I will say this. Obviously, this is, you have a book out and everything like that, but something that, wait, I don't know if you remember me speaking with you about this, but obviously Wade, you know, has forgotten more about annuities than I'll ever know, kind of thing. And as I was starting to just beef up on it, this is years ago, I remember telling Wade, Wade, I heard this podcast by this guy called Kerry Pechter, and he's he's conveyed he's the first person that has sort of I've heard speak about annuities in such a clear way. Do you vaguely remember that or anything like that,
Sure. Yeah,
Wade? And
I remember.
Wade did the oh, I know him.
Oh, oh yeah.
Remember that years ago, Wade, where I kind of said, dude, he's great. He explained it in a manner that I think anyone would understand. I forgot which podcast it was, and I'm sure you do a bunch of them, but you were just talking about, look, at the end of the day, annuity is a contract that's risk off. Investments are risk on, and you went in that sort of thread. And when you framed it like that, I was, the light bulb really went off in my head from the standpoint of, oh, I got to use this way of conveying, how annuity is different from an investment and so forth. 'Cause I just thought you hit the nail on the head. Hence, I think that's why you wrote that book, Annuities for Dummies, because you got it at such a great angle from my vantage point.
Well, the angle came from, having to explain it to people at Vanguard, and then realizing that the previous explanations had not worked. And that podcast, that was an epic podcast with Christine Benz of Morningstar.
Is that the one it was? Okay, I don't remember because I
Yes.
just kind of like go crazy on podcasts at a certain point, and I just remember and I remember thinking, wow, this guy's on it. Like he's really clear about this.
Yes, many people heard that podcast, and it just that was a turning point, kind of, for a little bit of my exposure. And because Christine, has such stature in the financial services industry, the fact that she was interviewing me, brought annuities a little bit in from the cold too. So
Gotcha.
so
No, I didn't even think about it.
that was a fun interview.
Okay.
Well, so a lot does change in the annuity world, and you had the first edition in 2008. And I don't know if you had that early on, if you're able to track sales numbers, but we hear so much about with the financial crisis. Did you see an increase in interest during the financial crisis? And then going beyond that, now with the second edition, can you just talk about, like, how did you restructure, reframe the conversation with a 15-year gap and so much changing in the annuity world? What's new in the
Well,
second edition?
eh, Well, everything has changed. Of course, I mean, 15 years ago, the variable annuity with a guaranteed lifetime withdrawal benefit was the top product, and companies from overseas were piling in to sell it, like AXA and ING, and the at the same so that was the go-to. They were on their way toward building up, what is now, it's like $2 trillion in liabilities in that product. and and it was huge. And then it would then run into a lot of trouble with the crisis, and that's not the leading product anymore. And at that time, the fixed index annuity was called the equity index annuity, and it was still in the wild west of insurance agent sales, and regulated by states rather than the variable annuity being regulated by the SEC and FINRA. And so besides that, that was pre retire the registered index linked annuities. It was pre a lot of turnover. It was pre the entry of private equity companies into the business. And so I've tried to incorporate all of those changes into the new one. I would say that what's similar about it has been my overall take. And going back to Alex's question about trying to explain this clearly, what I tried to do with the first book, and it's still true of the second book, is that I took each of these annuities as as separate products for separate purposes, for separate different kinds of people at different times. I broke them out into complete. I wanted to emphatically make them different products for different purposes, because what I had found was that in almost everything I read was that people came to annuity. When people asked what are annuities, well, first of all, annuities was just this one big umbrella, as if they're all just variations of the same kind of product. And they were all supposed to be variations of you get an annuity when you're relatively young, you contribute to it for many years as a long-term investment to take advantage of the tax deferral. And then when you get to retirement, you flip on the income stream, and you keep that till you die. Well, that's kind of an idealized use and description of the product, which is not really the way the product is ever used, and is rarely used. So, and then also people would say, okay, we have annuities, and there are fixed annuities and there are variable annuities. One has a fixed income stream, the other has a variable income stream, and then there are immediate, and then there are deferred annuities. Immediate annuities where you start payment right away, and a deferred is where you wait several years until you switch on income. Well, this is this is the way most descriptions go, and I realized when I was trying to explain it to people, this is not what we're dealing with, because the first thing I was told was, no one annuitizes deferred annuities. That's what they told me. The first thing I learned about annuities at Vanguard was nobody turns a deferred annuity into a income annuity. And so that was the beginning of of the light going on, the illumination. And so I said, okay, in 2008, when all of that was very much fresh in my mind, then I said, okay, we're going to write this book. I'm going to structure this book, as these being separate products for different purposes. And that's true. The other thing I wanted to get into the original book, and which I continued in this book, and we can talk about some of that later with my Meet the Empty Nesters column, sort of, was that the original book had a chapter called Getting Creative with Annuities. And I really wanted to impress upon people, I wanted to empower people that you can take these things and they're malleable in your hands, and you can, add them in doses this way and that way, and you can control how you use them in retirement, for different periods of retirement, for different kind of risks in retirement, that this is something that you can put into your hands and use as your own personal shop tool. It's not something that you can just have to go to a salesman and the salesman say, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to get, this is going to be, and you're going to get this pile of, paperwork, and that you're on the receiving end of something you don't really understand. I really wanted, this to be, to turn it around and turn annuities into do-it-yourself retirement products, because I thought that you could very easily do that once you get a handle on how they work and how you could modify them.
So you mentioned the it's for those who are listening to this, annuities are, we started with the trying to explain annuities as fixed versus variable and immediate versus deferred. I still try to stick to that organizational structure, even though it's tough because fixed annuities can have variable returns, variable annuities can have fixed returns. Immediate versus deferred means the two different things, whether you're annuitizing the contract or whether when the income begins, it's completely different topics. So could you emphasize again how you were able to move away from that sort of organizational structure? It's more a matter that you go through the different types of annuities one by one and don't worry about those distinctions? Or what exactly did you do to break away from having to talk about that overarching framework?
Because I put them each in a different chapter. I just gave them their own chapter and didn't make it into a branching kind of conversation of and I started fresh with each catch. This product is for this. This product is for this. This product is for this, and speaking directly to the individual as as a pre-retiree, and then reinforcing it in the copy whenever I could. Of every time it wasn't something that I had to learn how to do. I had learned how to do that at Vanguard. So, and where I had a lot of excellent help, especially from a guy named John Amerix, who is one of the original retirement gurus from TIA, and then he went to Vanguard, and maybe he's retired now. But John had written, seminal papers, which Wade, you probably are familiar with. I mean, John and Mark Warshawski and Veres, wrote that article, which was one of my entry points into, and I got to work with John side by side on the web articles that we were doing about annuities. And so I didn't have to hear secondhand. I mean, I didn't have to learn about it secondhand. I learned about it from John, who had come from TIA. And so there was, it was excellent education. So I'm drifting off a little bit, but let's go back to the point.
Right, but yeah, that was a foundational article. I think it came out in 2001, one of the first to look at this idea that if you put part of the assets into an annuity, it has the potential to improve retirement outcomes, higher probabilities of success, and so forth.
Yes,
that
yes.
Lay the foundation for what all came after, for sure.
Yeah, so I was I had a good teacher.
So in the book, is there just for folks thinking about it? Because one of the things we did is we've gone through the various types of annuities and the like. Instead of going through any of them, is there one in particular in the book that you give an interesting treatment to that serves as the epitome of how you treat all of these different types of annuities, just to kind of give somebody an example or a flavor of what they would be looking at if they picked up the book and wanted to read a chapter on, I don't know, FIAs or something like that?
Well, I cover in each case, and I separate it out, in different parts of the book. There's the description of the products and how they work, and I wanted people to know precisely how they work, mainly because this was a black box. These products were a black box that really needed some sunlight, and so I talk about how they work, and then I talk about how they're used, and how you can use them, and what to look out for, and where they fit in, and I talk about every part of the food chain, from what's going to happen when you meet with an agent, what you're going to hear, where they're coming from, what their incentives are, and then but what I'm really interested is once you get them, then where they fit in. So since and you might use 3 or 4 different kinds of annuities in your in your retirement plan. And that's what I wanted to show, that these are like Legos that you can put together. That the important thing to emphasize at the beginning was that every retirement is different. Everyone's retirement is different. I mean, I'm going to tell you some things now that, these are things I learned from Wade. We're going to come full circle here. Wade's written a lot about it, about how people are different, and they have different needs. And that's true not only in the personality of the person, but also in their specific assets and liabilities going into retirement. So I had to try to explain that without scaring people, because I think the single hardest thing for people to do, and we underestimate it maybe, is let's estimate because this starts with, let's estimate what your expenses are going to be in retirement. Well, bong. I mean, if you've ever tried to do that in your life and sit down with your spouse and your house and your, what you own and projecting it into the future, that is a heck of a piece of homework. It's just estimate your expenses in retirement. No, first thing that happened when I retired was I got told that I needed a new drain field for the sewer system behind my house. Okay. I had not planned. I had not planned for that whatsoever. So, and so I had to impress upon people. Okay, well then, you just like pick a number, get, and then work through a little bit at a time of, well, okay, what's the difference between that and your expected, assets and your expected guaranteed income streams, and yada yada, things that Wade has written about in great depth. So does that answer the question? I hope I haven't.
I'm trying to, in my head, I'm trying to think. We have consumers listening in, and so I'd rather. Is it possible for someone to drill down, like on one of your chapters, like, okay, let's take a fixed index annuity. This is the situation where this would make sense for somebody. This is how they would view their fees, or something like that. Just something that gives somebody some practical kind of utility, that they can see, oh, okay, this book is about, this is the kind of treatment that this book gives this type of annuity. So if I, check it out, then I'm going to get the same type of treatment for the other type of products. That way they get something.
Mm-hmm.
That might be an example if you have some case studies in the book with the empty nesters family.
Yes, their initials are MT and then Nestor, KNESTOR.
And that's a series of case studies. I think that's what's addressing Alex's question, where you really work through, here's some examples of this is what they're trying to do.
I talk to actual people near retirement with assets, with people with $1 million, or more, which is what most advisors' case histories look like, but it could be less. And I took their case histories and I got their numbers from them, their financial numbers. And then I went to a practitioner of what I call ambidextrous investing, ambidextrous advice and retirement, which is people who can combine investments and annuities in synergistic ways in the same retirement plan. And that's and I think Wade is definitely in the same school. We've been swimming in the same water, forever on that principle. And so I would take these case studies to advisors who I had met through the old Retirement Income Industry Association and ambidextrous advisors, and turn the case over to them and ask them to provide and one of them was Mark Washarsky, who has written about a particular kind of drawdown method. And so I would turn it over, and then they would come up with the plans for the individuals. And so a person could go to, there's 5 or 6 case studies that I published in, or maybe 5 or 10 in Retirement Income Journal, where you could go there and see, okay, I'm an upscale person, 2 professionals, $1.2 million in savings, a $1 million house, children who are grown and on their own, what legacy goals do they have? What is the, et cetera, et cetera. What are their, necessities? What are their luxuries, bucket list items, et cetera? What are they trying to finance in retirement? And then come up with a plan. And each of these practitioners. So I would show with these case studies, not only specific people, but also a range of advisors, a range of approaches to these kinds of challenges. And that's something that I definitely wanted to get in the book. I thought the case histories were important. I also, in the course of writing about registered index-linked annuities, they're not so new anymore. They're 10 years old, but they're still new to a lot of people. Talked to someone who had had experience with the investment returns. This was turning it around. This is a person who wasn't trying to plan a retirement. This is a person who bought a RILA and had gone through several years of the not easily predictable returns of this type of product. And so he talked about his returns, and he was, of course, it all depends on when you get in and when you get out of the market. That's a complication, but I thought it was very useful for people to say, okay, here's what one guy in these circumstances in the 20 teens experienced with his registered index-linked annuities. And I thought that's something that I never saw in the popular literature, and I thought that it should be included.
No, I think that's great. I think, some of the calls, and granted, in this series that we've been running on annuities, it's been just teaching, and we've been a little short on the actual practical use case, or even, hey, how to read an annuity contract, kind of thing. We haven't really delved into those, and so I'm just curious, does your book get into that? Because we give the definitions, and we haven't been able to get into the nitty gritty of, okay, this is the calisthenics of getting an annuity. And so with your book, is there a definitive before and after? Like, someone before they read your book is this, someone after they read your book has been transformed to be able to do that. What would you say that transformation is for those contemplating, hey, should I pick up this book?
Oh, yes. I mean, I go through every step, meeting the agent, where you'll meet them, what are the different kinds of people who distribute annuities. I talk about the documents that you will see and that you will have to sign and that you should probably read, and talk about how they can't possibly read all of it, but that there are certain particular parts of each document that they need to look at very carefully. And
This would be interesting. Would you mind going through like one of these?
One of these chapters?
Not for like 60 minutes of these are the 5 pages, but okay, what type, who do they meet? Where do they meet them? For our folks listening in, okay, you said they would meet this advisor. How would they do that?
Oh, okay. Well, that would depend in part on the type of annuity, and
Exactly.
this was a structural issue in the article. I would have to mention some of that stuff in the article on the particular annuity, but then come back to it later in greater depth when I was talking about the distribution. And the general public, I think, needed to know a couple things about manufacturing and distribution that they did not know. They could meet, if they met someone, got an invitation to a seminar or a luncheon or a free dinner to talk about. I talked about what kinds of advisors or agents distribute this way, what kinds of products that those people are likely to be selling, and that you need to know not only about the different annuity, but the different people sell different kinds of annuities. And it was an extremely important point to make, was that the type of advisor you go to is going to largely determine the type of product that you see, to the exclusion of the other products. And this I always wish that there was an agent who said, well, spread out. These are all the things that you could be doing. And of course they can't. There's no way it would not be overwhelming. But to say, okay, you're going to meet somebody from a brokerage. Okay, that kind of person is going to be interested in selling you a variable annuity, perhaps with a living benefit. And that's changed a little bit, or a registered index-linked annuity. And because they are, licensed by the Federal Reserve, and they sell by the SEC, and they are and they sell registered products. Well, it took some doing to break this down in a way that did not just pile everything in at once. So I tried to, like with a particular kind of annuity, I tried to say, okay, we're talking about this annuity. Here's who sell this annuity. Here's who sell this annuity. Here's where they sell it, how they sell it. Here's the contract that you'll see and be asked to sign. Here's what you should look at very closely in the contract. To the, in addition to the boilerplate, what's not boilerplate and what's vital, what's going to commit you, what could you make a mistake with if you don't read this and you overlook, checking a particular box. So all of that is done in a way that it had to be carefully constructed so that it did not turn into a lot of fudge.
No. I think that's great. I think that's missing. So I think your book really adds this piece that, frankly, Wade and I could be doing a better job at, in this series. But what you're doing is you're taking them soup to nuts to be an informed consumer, so they know what they're getting into, how they get into it, and how they go through this process from A to B, from A to Z, really.
I
That's what I'm
definitely
trying to
did
get at.
not. I did not. I definitely wanted to write a consumer book. The first book was a consumer book. This book is a consumer book. There are a lot of things that are written from the perspective of the manufacturers, a lot of things that are written from the perspective of the advisors, or based on things that but I had the privilege of having been on the other side of the window in marketing these things. And so I was working for a direct company that sold directly to the public, at Vanguard. And so it wasn't a huge stretch for me to sit down in the consumer seat. That was and everything that I had learned from working on the inside and from writing about the industry formed the consumer view. But the consumer, this is a consumer book. I should mention, as a kind of plug, is that the first book, well, one of the reasons that Wiley wanted to do a sequel or a revision was that the first book is still selling, and it had a 4.3 out of 5 rating from 242 different reviewers on Amazon, and many people said that this book was the first book that had enabled them to understand what annuities were, and that they are not just one thing with different variations, and so that was my goal, and that was building on having to break things down for consumers in my previous job.
Join us for the next episode of Retire with Style to hear the rest of Wade and Alex's conversation with Kerry.